Welcome everybody to CMN 153 for our second summer session at GCC. My name is Lillian Ruiz and I'm the instructor for the class. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about the class and get a little bit of feedback from you as to how to proceed with this particular class. Normally I teach this class in person, but obviously with the situation that we're in now, that isn't going to be happening. So we're going to be working online instead. So what I'm going to be doing is to be transferring over what I would normally do in person to an online format and getting some feedback from you as to how you think the best way might be to proceed with doing that. So what we would normally do is meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 4 o'clock. So what I will be doing is posting videos like this one every Tuesday and Thursday at 1 o'clock. I'll also be posting some class notes. So this will be the way that I can communicate with you the material that I would have communicated with you in class. And then what we need to do is to make some decisions about how we would go about talking about that particular material. And ideally, it would be great if we could all be able to meet at the same time. Now, I understand that that probably is not possible. If for whatever reason everyone is available on Tuesdays and Thursdays sometime between 1 and 4 o'clock, we could set up a Zoom session or we can set up an online chat session or both, and then we could have a synchronous meeting. And my suspicion is that's probably not going to be possible. So what my thinking is at this point is that we would have a discussion forum where you would have a period of time in which you could respond through text. So that would allow you some flexibility. And I can say that with previous classes, what we've decided to do is to have Zoom or online chats as a kind of optional extra credit activities for those of you who are able to meet at a particular time so that we could discuss the class. So I'm thinking that's probably the way that we will proceed with this particular class, but one of the things that I have for you to do at the ending of this video is to answer a question which I've posted, which is, how do you think we should structure this online class? And to please send responses to my email, which is ruiz, R-U-I-Z, at gcc.mass.edu. And I'll gather all of your responses. And then what I will do on Thursday is I will give you a more definitive sense of how the class will be structured. In terms of the assignments, we should be able to duplicate what we would normally do in class online fairly easily. You would have a series of basically 3 kinds of assignments. You'd have something called a journal, which would be informal writing assignments about the topics we talk about in class. And that's something that you can hand in through email to me, and then I could respond and return that to you. And then you would have a final project where you would be doing some more in-depth analysis about an area about media and popular culture that's of interest to you. And that's also something that we should be able to do fairly easily online. You can submit that to me via email. I can make comments and submit that back to you. Then we would end the semester with an in-class final examination, but that final would be open book, open notes, so you could access things like your text and your journals and any of your other writings. So I think we should be able to duplicate that online fairly easily as well, in that I can post the final and then you can respond to it within a period of time and send that to me via email. So what I've done is I've posted a copy of our syllabus, and you can see that above in the document section, of what our class would have looked like pre-COVID-19. And I'll review that syllabus and give you a sense as to how the semester will progress. And you can see that my name is on there, Lillian Ruiz. That's usually one of the first questions I get is, what should I call you? I'm pretty informal, so feel free to call me Lillian, but if that doesn't feel comfortable to you, then feel free to not call me Lillian, but most people do. And you can see my phone number is there. If you wanted to, you could leave a message. My office hours are by appointment. My email is there as well, and you can see my email is just my surname, Ruiz, ruiz at gcc.mass.edu. No first initial for me because I was one of the early pioneers to get email at GCC. So I've been at GCC for quite a while. I teach in the English department, but I also teach public speaking, and I also teach media and popular culture, which is part of what this particular class happens to be. And I also have a class blog. So while we'll be using Moodle, I will try to duplicate what we've got on Moodle onto our class blog as well. The difference with the class blog is you don't necessarily have to go through the GCC portal to access that particular information. There is a textbook for the class, Media and Culture 11, Mass Communication in a Digital Age by Campbell. And you should be able to purchase that in the GCC bookstore, but you can also purchase that online through various sources. And you don't necessarily need to use the 11th edition, so if you find an earlier edition, you're free to use that. And basically what the textbook does is it gives you a historical overview of different kinds of media, and then of course we can add our own thoughts and commentary with what we are experiencing now in 2020 to make it contemporary. And you can see that under the course description that this class is a general overview of the history and influence of mass media on popular culture. So one of the things we're going to need to do is to determine some definitions for what is media, what is mass media, what is culture, and what is popular culture. And that we'll be doing in the future. The course examines advertising, books, newspapers, magazines, radio, film, television, gaming, music, and the internet, with a focus on developing visual literacy and critical thinking skills. You've probably heard of critical thinking in other of your college classes. I think of critical thinking as basically asking questions, digging beneath the surface, doing what toddlers do really well, actually, which is asking why. We may not always be able to get the answer to why, but I think asking the question why is central in terms of our trying to understand what's happening in media and popular culture. You can see that there is a prerequisite for this class, which happens to be English Composition 1, or that's what we call it at GCC, an introductory composition class. Probably that was an English 101 for you at GCC. If you think you haven't met that prerequisite, please let me know, and as soon as possible, and then we can talk about what your options might be. Under student learning outcomes, you can see that I've indicated what you should expect in this class. That you get to identify and understand contemporary media techniques, that you get to read and critically examine the images in contemporary media, that you get to identify major themes and issues in contemporary media, that you get to see the relationship between media and our society, and you get to improve oral and written communication skills. So basically this class is a general introduction to the content and techniques of contemporary media by examining representative mass media. And the procedures are that we will have some mini lectures, which I can duplicate through video. We'll have some group work and class discussion, which we can duplicate whether we do through a synchronous format with Zoom, or what's probably more likely asynchronous through something like a discussion forum, or perhaps some combination thereof. And basically, you can see the course requirements are to keep up with the reading, to submit your periodic journal entries discussing your reactions to the reading, a final project, and a final examination. So the syllabus talks about each of those a little bit in turn. In terms of the response journal, you can see that what I've indicated is that journals are meant as a kind of informal writing. It's an opportunity for you to analyze media, and guidelines are very informal. So you can use the journals in the way that you think would be most beneficial for you to explore media. I will offer some suggestions in class, but on the whole, the journal should reflect whatever relevant thoughts or questions or ideas that you have. And as we'll soon find out, sometimes the questions are a lot more interesting than the possible answers. And basically, the journals also provide an opportunity to brainstorm and free write project topics. and also final exam questions. You never know when you might anticipate something that might appear on the final. And certainly you can begin thinking about the final project actually now, even though I won't be discussing criteria for the next couple of classes. So if you think you've got a particular interest in an area of media, you can begin formulating some ideas of how you might go about examining that over the course of the semester. And basically, the idea behind the journals is that I would collect them on a regular basis and grade them, and that they would either be graded as excellent, which is a plus, a good, which is a check plus, a satisfactory, which is a check, less than satisfactory is a check minus, or an unsatisfactory, which happens to be a minus. And I don't review the journals for grammar or mechanics. Basically, I'm looking for content. You can kind of view it as a kind of conversation on paper. And in terms of late work, and for those of you who've taken other classes with me before, you know that basically late work can lower your grade by 1 full grade, and no late work will be accepted after a week has elapsed unless you made other arrangements with me. In other words, ask for an extension. I'll be happy to grant it to you. In fact, I prefer to grant it to you so that you can put your best effort into the work. That said, the reason why this works in all of the classes that I teach is because students take it seriously. I don't have students trying to take advantage and hand in everything on the very last day of class, because then I really wouldn't be able to continue to do this. But certainly if you need a few extra days, ask me and I'll be happy to accommodate you. And talking about accommodations, you can see that on our syllabus we have an institutional services disability statement, which I suspect you've seen in other classes, but I just wanted to read it to you. That to support access and inclusion, GCC offers reasonable accommodations to anybody with documented disabilities, whether they be physical, learning, psychiatric, sensory, and so forth. So if you need an accommodation for this class, do provide me with a copy of your accommodation agreement as soon as possible so we could discuss your needs. And of course, our discussions would be confidential unless you give me permission to share them with others. And if you require accommodations but you do not have that accommodation agreement, please contact Disability Services, and there's some information there on how you can do that, their phone number for instance, and then you can get that information to me. In terms of what we would have been doing if we were meeting in person is that there would be an attendance requirement, which would be folded into your participation grade, and there's still a participation grade for this class. And then basically what I'm going to be doing is, as I indicated, is posting class videos on Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, and then asking a brief question based on those videos for you to respond to. And that would count as your class attendance. In terms of your class participation, it would be very similar to what you might do in a brick and mortar class. Some of you might participate more, some of you might participate less in terms of your comfort level and in terms of the curriculum. And the idea is that as long as you are present and you are engaged on some level and paying attention, then that would be enough for your participation grade, which happens to be 10% of your grade. And then in terms of thinking about consultations, you can see that you can meet with me by appointment. And your final course project, as I had indicated, is an analysis of a particular form or technique of media, and I'll discuss guidelines in class. It's due on or before the last day of class. I encourage early submissions. If you submit it in early enough, I can evaluate it, return it back to you, and you have the option of doing a revision. Taking my comments into account and redoing your assignment, you would get the higher of the 2 grades. And I don't feel like I'm giving away any unfair advantage, because this is basically the way that professional authors do their writing, is that they get lots of feedback from a lot of different places. So in terms of your final project, you can see that you've got up until the ending of the semester, but I encourage you to begin thinking now about some ideas and topics that you might like to pursue for your final project. And I'll talk about the final project a little bit more in depth. And the final project should be something that you could submit to me via email, just like your journals are something you could submit to me via email, and I can return back to you. I'm going to skip the plagiarism section for now, and instead I'm going to go to the grading section. As I had indicated, 10% is participation, and the way you can satisfy that is by watching class videos and by responding to the questions that I've got for each of the videos. And certainly the more you interact with me and your classmates through discussion forums or Zooms or online chats or whatever it is we decide to pursue as a class, then that is additional participation. But my request is that you basically do the readings and that you watch the videos and you answer the questions that I pose. 30% of your grade are those journals, and we have a total of 10 journals over the course of the semester. Again, I'm not evaluating those journals based on grammar or mechanics, just based on content. Most students end up writing about a page or so for each journal, but as long or as short as you think your journal happens to be. The final course project is 30%. And most students end up writing your traditional academic paper of about 4 to 5 pages or so, double spaced, 1-inch margins. But you do have some flexibility with the course project because this is a media class, so you are free to utilize media for your course project. So I've had individuals do things like film short documentaries, for instance, and submit that as their final project. So you can begin to think creatively if you would so like to in terms of this final project. And again, I'll give you more direction as the semester proceeds. And then finally, 30%, that final exam, it'll be a series of essay questions, and I'll give you some choice within those essay questions. Again, you can submit that final to me via email, and then I can return it back to you. For an A, excellent, B, good, C, satisfactory, and as I always like to say at the beginning of the semester, we really don't want to be concentrating on any grades lower than a C. And then you can see on our course outline that what I've done is I've posted what we would have done if we were meeting in a brick and mortar situation, if we were meeting live on Tuesdays and Thursday afternoons. So you could see that our first class would have been on Tuesday the 14th, and it would have been introduction. And that's what this is, where I basically introduce myself and I give you a sense of what the class is going to be. On the 16th, what I have is a reading day. So basically for Thursday, this gives you an opportunity to be able to catch up with some of the readings. And what I'll be able to do on Thursday the 16th is to report back to you how the class has answered the question of how it's best for us to proceed online. And what I'm going to try to do is to take all of your responses into account so that we can come up with the best online experience possible. And then we can see that we begin in earnest week 2, and this is where we begin on Tuesday the 21st. So before Tuesday the 21st, I ask that you read Chapter 1, which is a mass communication, and also Chapter 15, media effects and research. So basically, you should have the readings done before that particular class, because that's what I'm going to be talking about on the video on the 21st. Mass communication and media effects and research, where basically we get to talk a little bit about definitions and some of the ways that mass media has been examined from a scholarly perspective, even though mass media was never really created to be examined in that way. And then you can see that on Thursday the 23rd, I've got 2 more chapters that we'll be talking about. Advertising, which is on Chapter 11, and Public Relations, which is Chapter 12. And advertising and public relations are very similar to one another, as we will discuss. You can see that I've indicated chapters rather than page numbers in the event that you happen to be using an older edition of the text. And then you can see that when we move to week 3, this is when you are going to have your first journal assignment, and it will be on advertising and public relations. So basically, I see our class on the 21st about mass communication and media effects and research as just the foundational class. We actually begin the content once we start talking about advertising and public relations. So that journal will be due the 28th, so we'll have some time to talk about advertising and public relations and some more time to talk about how to construct the journals. You can see that on the 28th is when we will be talking about the internet, which is on Chapter 2. And then on the 30th of July, we'll be talking about books in Chapter 10. That's when your second journal will be due, which is on the internet. So basically, you'll have a journal due after the class in which we've talked about that particular topic. So you could utilize what I've discussed in class and what individuals might have discussed in an online format in your journals if you so wanted to. We'll go to week 4, and in week 4 we'll talk about 2 chapters on the 4th of August, newspapers and journalism, since they're both so closely tied together, from chapter 8 and chapter 14. And you'll see that you'll have your third journal due, which happens to be books. And expect that we will be watching some media as well as talking about media as well as the semester progresses. And then on the 6th, we'll talk about magazines. That happens to be chapter 9. That's where you have your 4th journal due, which is on newspapers and journalism. When we hit week 5, on the 11th is when we talk about radio, which happens to be on chapter 5. And you would have your journal on magazines, since we would have talked about that previously. And you can see that on the 13th, we'll talk about movies, which is chapter 7. And the 13th is when you've got your 6th journal due on radio. Week 6, we go into TV and cable, which happens to be in chapter 6. That's when you have your 7th journal due, which is on movies. And then on the 20th of August, you see that we'll be talking about music, which is in chapter 4. And that's when you'll have your 8th journal due, which happens to be on TV and cable. And then finally, we end the semester with week 7, which is August 25th, when we will talk about our last topic, which happens to be digital gaming. That happens to be in chapter 3. And you would have your journal due on that day for music. And then the 27th, which happens to be our very last class. That's the class in which I will be posting the final examination. And it's also the class in which you would have your 10th and final journal due, digital gaming. And that would be the last time in which you could hand in your final project. So that gives you a sense of an overview of the class and some of the topics that we're going to be discussing. So again, please think about how you think you'd like the class to proceed. My thinking is that what makes the most sense is that I continue to post videos like this one, but talking about class content, as well as class notes that basically review what I talked about in the video. That we have probably some sort of a discussion forum is what I'm guessing, and then you would have a period of time in which you could respond to that discussion forum. And then doing something like having Zooms or online chats as optional or extra credit for those individuals who are interested, and we try to find a time where we could all be available. If it turns out that you've got other ideas or other suggestions on how to proceed, please let me know. And I will be posting something on Thursday by 1 o'clock, probably sooner than that, but certainly by Thursday at 1 o'clock, just sort of filling you in on what specifically we're going to do to make this class an online class, and I'll update our syllabus as well. So I hope you're well. I'm well. Thank you so much for taking this class during this incredibly challenging time. And I look forward to us having community and being able to discuss media and popular culture. Take care. Bye-bye.